When you think of communication, you probably imagine words, speaking, writing, or texting. But here's something important. Much of our communication actually happens without words. Think about the last time you walked into a room and instantly sensed the mood. Maybe people were smiling and laughing, or maybe they were quiet and tense. You didn't need anyone to say a word, yet you already knew what was going on. That is the power of nonverbal communication. And today, we'll explore what nonverbal communication is, how it works, and why it is so powerful in shaping human interaction. Let's start with the basics. So, in communication studies, we often distinguish between digital and analogic symbol systems. Verbal communication, whether spoken or written, is digital. It uses structured symbols like words, grammar, and syntax. Nonverbal communication, on the other hand, is analogic. It relies on body language, gestures, facial expressions, and other cues that don't follow strict grammar but still carry meaning. Think of it this way. Words are like numbers on a digital clock, clear and precise. Nonverbal cues are more like the hands of an old-fashioned clock. You have to interpret them, but they still give you the time. We can also think about communication channels. Verbal channels include face-to-face conversations, phone calls, emails, or video conferencing. But beyond this, there are countless nonverbal channels that shape the meaning of every single message. For example, imagine sending a text message that says, "I'm fine," without tone, facial expression, or body language. That could mean actually fine or totally upset. You never know. Nonverbal cues fill in the gaps. Here's a common question. Is sign language nonverbal? Surprisingly, the answer is actually no. Sign language is actually a verbal system because it has grammar, vocabulary, and syntax just like spoken languages. It's structured and precise. Nonverbal communication, by contrast, includes things like gestures or expressions that don't form a complete language system. Think about the difference between waving at someone to say hi versus using American Sign Language to say hello. One is a gesture, the other is part of a full linguistic system. Researchers typically identify 9 key channels of nonverbal communication. Let's walk through each one of them with some everyday examples. The first is kinesics, which are body movements. This includes gestures, posture, and body orientation. Imagine you're in a group project meeting. If your teammate is leaning in, nodding, and gesturing with their hands, you feel they're engaged. But if they cross their arms and turn away, you might think they're uninterested or even hostile. The second is facial expressions. Facial expressions are perhaps the most universal form of nonverbal communication. Happiness, sadness, anger, surprise, fear, and disgust are recognizable everywhere. For instance, if you walk into a classroom before exam, you can quickly tell who is nervous, who is confident, and who is frustrated just by looking at their faces. 3. Eye behaviors, or we can say oculesics. Eye contact is powerful. In the US, maintaining eye contact shows confidence and honesty. But in some Asian cultures, looking directly into a teacher's eyes for too long may feel disrespectful. Even in everyday life, a simple glance across the room can signal attraction, while avoiding eye contact might suggest nervousness or guilt. 4. Haptics, which is actually touch. Touch can communicate warmth or distance. A firm handshake in a job interview makes a positive impression. A hug from a friend after a tough day communicates comfort. But cultural norms differ. Mediterranean cultures make great with hugs and kisses, while in Northern Europe, people value more personal space. 5th, paralinguistics, which are actually vocal qualities. This is about how we see something rather than what we say. Tone, pitch, speed, and volume can completely change meaning. Think about someone saying, "Really?" in a flat tone. It may mean boredom. But "really?" in an excited tone conveys enthusiasm. Sarcasm works almost entirely through paralinguistics. Physical appearance, the way we dress, our hairstyle, our body shape, all send messages. In the workplace, a suit may signal professionalism, while jeans and sneakers suggest informality. On a first date, people often put extra effort into appearance because they know it communicates seriousness and respect. 7. Proxemics, the use of space. Personal space matters. In the US, casual conversations typically keep up to 18 inches of distance. In some Latin American countries, people stand closer. Imagine someone stepping too close to you in an empty elevator. You immediately notice that. It is the proxemics at work. 8. Chronemics, which means time. Time also communicates meaning. Showing up 10 minutes early to an interview says, "I respect your time. I take this very seriously." But showing up late might suggest carelessness, unless you're in a culture where time is more flexible. In some countries, arriving late to a social event is actually the norm. 9. Olfaction, which means smell. Smell is a surprisingly strong channel. Perfume, deodorant, or even the smell of fresh-baked cookies can influence people's impressions. Studies show smell is 100 times more memorable than visual cues. Can you believe that? Think about how a certain perfume instantly reminds you of a loved one, or how body odor might unconsciously change your perception of someone. Nonverbal communication also regulates the flow of conversation through backchannels. It is a very important concept. These are the little signals we give as listeners, like nodding, smiling, saying "uh-huh" or "I see." For example, imagine Sarah tells her friend Emily, "I've got a big job interview tomorrow and I'm so nervous." If Emily nods, make eye contact and says, "You will do great," Sarah feels supported. But if Emily stares at her phone and mutters, right, Sarah feels dismissed. These small cues determine whether people feel heard or ignored. We've all had conversations where the other person's body language told us almost everything, even if their words said, "I am listening." To practice this, you can try the silent scenario game with your friends. One of you acts out a phrase using only gestures and facial expressions, while the other guesses it. Think about how we play charades with our friends, right? It's amazing how much we can communicate without words. This game shows us just how rich nonverbal channels really are. Nonverbal cues can also reveal deception. Psychologists call this nonverbal leakage. The little signs we can't fully control. Paul Ekman's research on microexpressions shows that emotions sometimes flash across our face for just a fraction of a second. For example, someone might say, "I'm fine," but for half a second, their face shows sadness. Even if you can't consciously point it out, you feel something doesn't add up. And finally, culture shapes everything. A simple gesture like the thumbs up can mean great in the US but be offensive in parts of the Middle East. Dismissive in Greece or simply means number 5 in Japan. This reminds us we can't assume our nonverbal cues mean the same thing everywhere. Being culturally aware prevents miscommunication and shows respect. To summarize, nonverbal communication includes 9 major channels, from body language and facial expressions to space, time, and even smell. It helps regulate conversation, reviews emotions, sometimes betrays deception. It always carries cultural meaning. Words matter, but so do gestures, tone, posture, and countless subtle cues. In fact, nonverbal signals often carry more weight than words themselves. By paying closer attention and by being sensitive to cultural differences, we can communicate more clearly and build stronger, more authentic relationships. That is why we need interpersonal communication rather than just staying connected on social media, because there are a lot of information about our feelings cannot be expressed singly in words. Thank you for listening, and I hope you live today more aware of not just what people say, but what they show.